grapes, you're looking at about 1 acre-foot per year. That's an average frost year. And I'm using the number for hemp because there really aren't any reliable numbers.
Excuse me, is that for one plant?
No, that's per acre. So it's 1 acre-foot per acre per year. So in case people don't know what an acre-foot is, that it'd cover an acre 1 foot deep in water, 1 whole acre. So to raise 1 acre of grapes, you need 1 acre-foot per year. With hemp, industrial hemp, some of the studies that I looked at, the Pacific Northwest and UC Davis did some studies, and it was 10 to 14 inches a year. So very similar in their requirements.
How about an indoor grow?
An indoor grow, I would guess that you're going to be using less water because the root system of the plants are going to be restricted to the container, and they probably won't be able to collect as much water as a plant that's growing in free ground. But, you know, wine grapes are one of those crops that can actually benefit from some water stress, where you don't give them as much water, it produces a higher quality product. But when you're growing marijuana, I think you're growing it for the flowers, and those flowers, they need a lot of water to produce those flowers. So there's, you know, you're going in two different directions there.
Okay. And to our panel on youth and children, specifically to Dr. Wandry, is your experience only with troubled youth? Are the issues of pot and troubled youth the same as the issues of pot with non-troubled youth?
Well, every year in some way or the other, we touch the lives of probably about 3,000 youth in this county. And there's 18 or 20,000 young people, I think, under the age of 18 in the county. So that's a pretty significant part of the county. And I would say that some of the impacts I talked about were things like youth who don't use, whose families aren't growers, talking about the resentment they feel about what's happening that they see around them. So I think that even the youth who do not, obviously as a human service agency, we get a lot of young people who have problems. That's why they come to us. And we work with them. But we also do a lot of work, prevention work in schools and other places in the community where we are exposed to other youth. And they tell us these stories, even if it's personally not affecting them, how it feels like for them to grow up in a community where they see this happening around them.
Thank you. It seems like we're coming back to Sheriff Allman here, but perhaps it'll be his companion. How many meth labs have been eradicated in Mendocino County in the last 2 years, and does that compare to pot? Now, I can't tell whether they're talking about dollars or numbers of individual instances, but
I would encourage people to read last week's Willis News on an article regarding meth lab and the reduction in statewide California and actually the nation, because the precursors that are needed for methamphetamine have been taken off the shelf, and that's why when you go to buy cold medicine now, you have to stand in line and go to the pharmacist, and even if it's over the counter, it's literally over the counter, not off the shelf. And so the number of drug labs have drastically dropped, and the answer is one drug lab in Mendocino County in the last 2 years. And so, of course, it's not going to correlate to the number of marijuana gardens.
So that's a significantly larger number.
Yeah, at our high point, no pun intended, was in the mid-90s, where one year we had, I believe, 19. So that's where we are.
The question from the House was, were there 19 meth labs dealt with in 1 year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That doesn't include cooking, bubbling meth labs. It may be a box lab where someone has, it's part of their past and they have it in the garage, but they have all the chemicals. It's going to require a huge amount of resources to get rid of the chemical. And if you look at 11379.6 of the Health and Safety Code, it specifically deals with manufacturing a controlled substance. And so that's methamphetamine would fall into the manufacturing a controlled substance. There have been some court decisions regarding hashish, which is obviously from a derivative of growing marijuana, And if you use the butane method or the ice method, some courts have recognized that as a violation of 11379.6. So the numbers may be skewed, and I don't have those specific numbers in front of me, but as we said earlier, the courts are interpreting the laws maybe a little different than how you and I would do it.
Thank you, Sheriff. To Mr. Cantor, how does the adult brain work with long-term use? Well, I think what they mean was how does it work if you have long-term use of cannabis?
How does the adult brain? You know, a lot of the research on long-term use on marijuana, I think, is still out. And we don't really know all of the long-term use of marijuana. There's very mixed research on that.
Also to that same panel, Dr. Courtney, can you explain why a patient would need 25 pounds of marijuana for 1 year?
There was in the Journal of Autoimmunity in the last year a study of this mouse strain in which 86% of these mice go on to develop diabetes. So all injectable and oral anti-diabetics are tested on this mouse strain. This mouse strain was given 5 milligrams per kilogram a day, which is, it was a reasonable dose, which averages for a 190-pound man at about 500 milligrams, which is about the same dose that you would take